Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the News Behind the News with Rav Kantab on Mix 94.7 FM. And thank you for joining me on today's program. Hope that you've been having a good day this afternoon. I'm definitely looking forward to the discussion I'm about to have with a gentleman that I've known for quite a while, and that is Mr. Riegnald, Bakari, and Arrindell. Good afternoon to you, sir, and thanks for being on the program.
Good afternoon, Ralph, and thanks for inviting me.
Great. I really look forward to the things that you will be sharing with us today. And I'll start off with one of my common questions that I tend to begin with, which is, regarding growing up here in St. Martin, what has stood out to you the most, and what is it that, would you say, you cherish the most about being from here, growing up here?
Well, off of the top of my mind, I would say that sense of belonging. During my younger years, the village was really a village. Today we have neighborhoods where persons just live and sleep and such. But I grew up in a time where persons looked out for each other in every sense of the word. Some of my cherished memories was coming home after school to meet my grandmother and great-grandmother on the porch, talking about events of the past and exchanging knowledge and things. And, just to be able to be in that family setting where you have that sense of protection, that sense of security. And, to be honest, when I look back, coming from very humble beginnings, those are some of the best times of my life, because you never wanted. You understand? You had your basic needs was met. And when persons loved you, they genuinely loved you. It wasn't based on condition. It wasn't based on class. It was just because you belong to us and we want the best for you.
Yeah. Now, even as you shared, that you grew up seeing your grandmother and great-grandmother sitting on the porch and stuff, was your family more of a matriarch family?
Well, no, actually, because both my grandfather and grandmother were married until the very end, you understand? So I had that privilege, you see, to be amongst them. And, there's something very unique between the relationship of a grandchild and a grandparents or great-grandparents, So I value those memories more than you can imagine. More importantly, because of the type of family I came from, had a reputation for being in sports, had a reputation for being very actively involved in a community, reputation for being politically active, reputation for being in the trade unionism. That in itself required that you as a young person coming up had to meet and fulfill certain standards and obligations. You see, so nothing was left to chance. It was all about, carrying on certain legacies, which was a very important component in our family.
And how is that like for you now as a father, passing that on to your children?
Well, it's interesting because there are certain things you can only understand when you become a father or when you become a parent, But because of that training that I had at home, and because of the little experience I've acquired, I constantly do my best to impress upon my son, especially my son, because he's almost 19.
Time flies.
Wow. I start young, but I constantly try to impress upon him the importance of maintaining that family name. Because when you call a last name in these small societies, it can either open doors or close doors. It can be associated, with so many positive attributes and virtues and such, or it could limit your access. You understand what I'm saying? So because of that knowledge, I would always impress upon him the importance, of making sure that the title that you have, you make it greater for your children also.
Yeah. And then finally on that note, what would you say are some of the key things that, in terms of lessons that, you still hold on to?
There are so many. Self-discipline is definitely one. You know, my grandfather was a boxer. At one point, he was
what was his name?
Batlin Ziki. George Pantaflet. Batlin Ziki was his name. And, you know, there comes a certain discipline, you know, when it comes to physical exercise, when it comes to taking care of your body and such. I really got that from my dad. And he was also an avid reader. He taught himself how to read. He taught himself how to write because, you know, in those days, persons weren't able to pursue further education. If you were lucky, you probably finished with a primary school, you know, if so much. So for my grandfather at that time, you know, to teach himself those things, to establish businesses and so on, I mean, those are the type of, how you say, his industrial enterprising nature that we try to, you know, maintain as such. So I would definitely say that's self-discipline.
Yeah. Okay. Which definitely reflected in yourself as well.
Give thanks.
So, you know, like many St. Martin students and children, we sometimes part our ways. You particularly went to the Netherlands where you studied. And I'm curious about how was life there for you, and in what ways did it impact you and your worldview?
Wow. You know, I graduated from the Sundial School at the tender age of 16. Now, you can imagine at that time, persons who would have graduated earlier than anticipated would have been met, you know, with a little resistance when it comes to pursuing higher education, you know, securing a scholarship and such. Also bear in mind that in St. Martin, we have a very sheltered culture. You know, we do our best to protect our children from the wiles of the world, as it was. You know, so you can imagine leaving St. Martin to go to a place, the Netherlands, a society that basically says anything is possible, everything is possible. You was immediately confronted with a culture shock. You know, we come from a society where we speak to teachers with respect. All right. Whereas in the Netherlands, I recall, you know, heated arguments between, you know, the students and the professors, sometimes even using expletives. You understand? So that was a culture shock for me. Of course, I would have seen different lifestyles. You know, we used to be very conservative on St. Martin. So you're bringing those, you know, ideas, you're bringing those values, and then when you reach there, you realize also that, hey, I am black. You understand?
Yeah.
You realize at one time, things that you take for granted.
The blackness is not highlighted when you're here.
Yeah, here is just like you take it for granted. But when you reach up there, you know, you really are confronted, you know, with a type of ideology, with a type of history that says, you know what, you are different. You are the other. And you have to now prove yourself that you are not going to be a statistic. You see, because you're coming into an environment that has basically prejudged you, you know, and it's just a matter of waiting to see whether you will become a statistic or you will be one of the lucky ones who would have, you know, fulfilled their purpose to come to the Netherlands. What I loved about the Netherlands in particular was that, you know, you had the freedom to explore also. Coming from, again, secondary education at St. Martin, the curriculum was a bit limited, you know, for political reasons, I will be so bold to say so. Yeah. So it really limited our understanding of the world. It limited our ability to interpret the world as persons coming from the Caribbean experience. Most of the time, the literature sought to promote the
inferiority.
Not only the inferiority, but it somehow tried to create the impression as though we had to be grateful for the so-called civilization that was forced upon us. You understand?
Yeah.
So, you know, you're coming from that, so you're already going with a chip on your shoulder, you know, and then you're in class and you're speaking with persons from all over the world, and they are boasting about what they have and what their country offers. And when it's your turn, they're asking you, well, do you even have roads? I mean, like, how many coconut trees do you have? You understand what I'm saying? Now, I could have been like the others and get upset and become disillusioned. But, you know, a part of me simply wanted to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
A part of me wanted to remind them that everything that you enjoy today is a direct result of the African Holocaust. You see? Of course, when you bring up these conversations, people get a bit squirmish and uncomfortable. But the truth had to be told. You understand? So that in itself triggered within me a desire, a hunger to learn, study, and research as much as I can about our African story. Because there's something transformative when you learn more about your story and you see what you have accomplished in the past. You see how you've contributed not only towards the development of African civilizations, but world history on a whole, you see? So it puts you now in a position that you are not merely a spectator. You was actually an actor. You was actively involved.
Literally trailblazing.
You understand what I'm saying? In many different areas, you see? So that's one thing I can say about my time in Holland. I really appreciated that. It gave me the opportunity to come even closer with different nations to learn from them, because you can learn from everyone. You can learn from everyone. And of course, one day I was happy to have a conversation with a brethren of mine of the Rastafari movement, and he introduced me to a series of books, dealing with African history and such. And of course, when I received my first copy of The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, my life as I knew it was never the same.
Yeah. Because you sometimes wonder then, what happened?
In what sense?
In a sense of, because the first time I read that book and read and also read about Marcus Garvey,
yes,
I was like, why are we not even much more further? So I said, what happened, you would think that because of, and not limiting, advancements and progress that we've made, but it gives you this sort of vigor, this sort of energy that makes you feel, and I think rightly so, like a conqueror, just proud and
of course, that's the point, and because persons understand the importance that history has in shaping your consciousness, because we know that literature, complete information, has the ability to shape one's consciousness, and as an extension of that, it shapes your perceptions and outcomes and abilities. You see? So because they always told us that we came from nothing, then nothing was expected of us. You see? But now you're going now, as it were, to the belly of the beast, right? And you're learning much more there than you learned
in your home.
On your own home. I learned more about St. Martin and Caribbean history and African history in the libraries of The Hague, and the libraries of Leiden University, and the libraries of Amsterdam than I did right here. You see, something is wrong with that.
Yeah.
Okay, even though we have to, the words of, I believe it was the late George Lamming, he said, and I try to paraphrase here, that the West Indian learns his West Indianness when he's abroad. And I think that's what happened. You understand? You learn more about these things. And now here you are, right? You're learning about all of these, this body of knowledge that was hidden from you. And as soon as you leave those corridors, you are confronted with the symbolism. You are confronted with the poor institutions and services that's supposed to help persons of Antillean origins and so forth and so on. You understand? So it puts within you now a sense of responsibility, because that's also the power of information.
Correct.
It puts within you a sense of responsibility. Persons will say, I don't want to read about the African Holocaust because it will bring up feelings of uneasiness, of anger. Well, there's something called righteous rage.
Yeah, righteous, yeah.
If we can cry for the so-called quote-unquote Jews or the Ashkenaz Jews, why can't you cry for your own? You understand what I'm saying? I always have a bit, I'm a bit confused when persons raise these arguments. Is it that we just simply want to continue repressing? I mean, we all know what the constant repression can do on one's immune system, on one's nervous system, and how trauma can basically transfer from mother to child and through different generations.
Yeah.
When will we deal with these particular matters? You understand?
Yeah.
To back on what you said earlier, a lot has happened.
Yeah.
Each and every time a group of people have made up in their mind to be self-determining, to pursue complete independence, whether political or otherwise, there is always a counterforce.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I was just going to add that.
Always.
Yeah.
Look at history.
Yeah.
The Caribbean history. Every time you have a movement of people that is striving for genuine development, there are always other forces. What do I mean? Just like you, I am a student of African and Caribbean history, of world history rather. Mm-hmm. And you will notice that at one point when the Caribbean region was agitating for political independence, when they was agitating for more sovereignty and such, when persons was leaving the plantations, what did they do? They brought in the indentured servants from Asia and so forth to water down the movement. You understand? We can take it to in the Caribbean again. Yeah. When you had, again, nations, trying to develop, pushing for national liberation, we see U.S. aid coming in, right? To bring development aid to Central South America, to the Caribbean. Why? To try and quell. We see it with the Marcus Garvey movement. We see it with the different trade union movements each and every time. Yeah. Each and every time we see it. You see? So I would say that we could have become, of course, we could have been much further. The thing is, because we don't really study and extract the lessons from history is the reason why we're always repeating it.
Correct.
You see, we have this idea about Black History Month when we just studying dates, places, and people.
Yeah.
But we don't try to understand the context. We don't say, well, what can we learn from this experience and apply it in our time today? And I think that's very unfortunate because we are missing so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you shared that, because even listening to you, the two things that stood out was, as we know, for example, the Haitian Revolution.
Yes.
Which it was interesting to see that the New York Times, published their bombshell review.
Yes.
And investigative work on it, which, although, there's been many publications since that has highlighted what took place, but then also Grenada.
Correct.
And Jamaica too, with the introduction of the drug trade and so forth, which was really and truly done to cause a social stir, which the island is still suffering with. So that is it really, because you have matters where indeed nations and groups of people, particularly African or African descent or majority African, come together for the sake of actual change and progress, and you meet this opposition because of that mindset of the J. Edgar Hoover.
Yes.
Yes. How did he put it? Eliminated the possibility of a black messiah. Exactly. So that and that mindset still exists.
Yes.
Because the same way trauma can be passed down, they also pass down these sorts of ideologies.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. You see, and the thing is, the African Holocaust really did serious damage on our mental health. You understand? This thing about the policy of divide and rule according to caste, according to ability and so forth, has done so much destruction, right? Because even let's look at the case of Jamaica. You have a nation under the leadership of then Michael Manley came to power, emerged from the trade union movement, I must add, seeking genuine reforms to empower the people, okay? Of course, we would have known that the 1970s in particular was a very rough year. We had Reaganomics, we had the rise of neoliberalism, we had the drop in commodity prices, because remember the Caribbean, the economies of the Caribbean were structured to be exporters.
Correct.
Of single crop exporters. That's where we have the bananas and the bauxite and the cocoa and so forth. So their economies was orientated to serve the needs of Europe. So with these prices dropping now, it puts their balance sheet in a very weak position. So what happens? Mr. Manley has to go now hat in hand, swallow his pride.
And borrow.
And approach the World Bank and approach the IMF, who is coming with these austerity, or rather the infamous structural adjustment programs that says, you have to limit public spending, you have to give more power to the free market, you have to reduce or cut workers' rights and so forth and so on. And did it help the Jamaican question? Of course not, because we see that their debt at that particular time just simply continued.
Yeah.
You understand
That
what
was
I'm saying?
especially when the same Jamaica instance when at the time their currency was even stronger than the dollar.
Yes, indeed. Okay.
Yeah.
And now what happens, right? Manley has to go through all of this. He loses the election. You have now Mr. Edward Siaga, pro-U.S., pro-capitalist, and so forth, promising all of these benefits and progress. He realized that he couldn't do it. You know, he realized that these structural adjustment programs...
They're not built for you to
exactly.
win. Yeah.
You see, because according to some, Michael Manley would have made the mistake, quote unquote, right, to align himself with persons who was designated as the enemies of America. You know, and that's very interesting to see how America is able to influence the foreign policies of independent sovereign nations. You understand? So because Jamaica wanted, or rather was part of the non-aligned movement and sought to align with whomever they pleased, that wasn't good enough for America. You understand? They believe that this part of the world is their third border or their backyard, and they want to protect their economic interests. That's why today I kind of laugh when I see persons, you know, condemning Russia because of the unprovoked war against the Ukraine. But they are very slow to condemn America.
The same thing that
has a history of destabilizing and continues to destabilize nations in this region.
Yeah. And the backpedaling, because it's very hypocritical. Even a perfect example of the region is Venezuela.
Yes.
You know, it was down with Maduro.
Yes.
And you can debate, you know, his policies and so forth. But the willful attempt to destabilize the country, but now all of a sudden, because of a fuel not fuel shortage, but you know, issues related to fuel provision availability. Now it's, you know, well, you know, you can now work with. So we'll give you sanctions. Before, you know, we had this issue for trading with Venezuela, but now because, well, we got to hold hands and sing kumbaya, you know, let's change. Let's turn back on our previous policy.
Yes.
And it's okay to work with him.
Yes.
Maduro is kind of a cool guy.
Yes,
I mean, he's almost white.
That has been
so.
Because look, what I've learned in political science is that there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests.
Right.
You understand? That's why I thought it was also hypocritical of let's say the president of America, who wanted to exclude 3 nations from attending the summit, the recently concluded summit of the Americas, right? But allowed Brazil that has a track record of attacking the rights of indigenous
rights
people,
abuses,
you know, with the overproduction of trees and timber.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even the fact that the number of journalists that went missing in Brazil under his tenure, and says nothing about it.
Yeah.
America talks about democracy and freedom of speech. Let's see what happened to the journalist Khashoggi. You understand what I'm saying? But they're still doing business
with Saudi Arabia.
You see? So it's all about interest. It's nothing about I like you and you they don't understand that language. Yeah. It's all about their ability to control vital resource wherever they step.
And that is, glad you said what you just said, because that in itself is the reason why we so matter to the Netherlands, for example, in our case, or France. Because I do often hear the statement that, well, Holland don't need us, but they really actually do. Why would a country put up with having to deal with, that's in our case, for example, multiple governments, even though, well, they themselves have had that issue too.
Correct.
But whether, you know, just providing funds for liquidity and aid and all these different stuff, constant changes that they themselves see, or corruption that they themselves state is reprehensible and it shouldn't be accepted, but they still accept it to the point of they still try, in their view, help, because we matter. You know, we were part of the kingdom for a reason, and you know, us being in the kingdom is for a reason.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Look, in my reading of Caribbean history, right? Because let's be honest, the Caribbean, as we now know it, is an artificial creation. Okay, it came into existence to serve the specific needs of the metropoles. Point blank period. You understand? We would have known that massive and intense extraction of raw materials, of labor, was used to lay the foundation of the European, of the Industrial Revolution, as a matter of fact, in Europe, okay? Even to modern times, we see how valuable the ABC Islands were to the Netherlands when they was able to position military and strategic assets, because they thought, you know, there would have been a little tension between Maduro and whomever. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, as you correctly pointed out, and you know, Holland is always on the lookout for opportunities to invest. Remember, when they designed our economy, it was for us to be the exporters of primary goods and services. We would have sent them to Europe and America. They in turn would have manufactured and add value to it and then sell it back to us. Okay? Let us remember that. So I would not be surprised that, you know, because even today when you go in a shop, you know, you see so many Dutch brands. You see? So I would not be surprised that one of the end game...
a home away from home.
Sorry?
A home away from home.
Well, of course. I mean, we see it in Borneo, we see it in Curacao.
It's building up now in Statia.
There you go.
Saba.
You see, there you go. So ultimately, you can see that there is a demand, there is a kind of an intention, you know, to I don't want to say supplant as yet, but to, you know, ensure that their population is well established wherever they go.
Yeah.
So what we are seeing now is just a preview of what is to come. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an Albertine on St. Martin. You see what I'm saying? So it can go. We already see that most of their lawyers and engineers and, you know, interns are coming down here for different reasons. So it's just a matter of time. You see? But at the end of the day, the responsibility is ours. Because,
that's it right there.
Yeah, ultimately the responsibility is ours. Okay? Look, anyone that knows me knows that I am pro-independence. Anyone that knows me that knows that I am anti-imperialist. You see? But at the same time, there is something called external imperialists and there's something called internal imperialists.
Yep.
And I think our people, we need to upgrade a bit when it comes to, you know, holding the internal imperialists accountable. You know, shifting my attention, shifting my focus to The Hague is one thing. But guess what? The dude in The Hague did not deny me a scholarship. The one in The Hague did not hide my files when I wanted assistance and so forth and so on.
Maybe a piece of government land or
For
something.
For example, you see what I'm saying? Those are the type of discussions that's important to us.
Yep.
Does this absolve The Hague of its role? Of course not. Of course not. But I'll tell you this much. At the end of the day, I don't care if it's a white person or a black person that box me, I'm going to box them back. To use our, you know, a slap from my own don't hurt less.
Yeah.
It's still a slap. You understand what I'm saying? It is still a slap.
Correct.
And I think we need to be a bit more serious. We have to be a bit more honest. Not because I know Ralph and, oh, law, he's one of our own. The law doesn't care about that. The law doesn't care whether you're from here or not.
Sure.
You violate, this is a consequence.
Correct.
You see? But we just always look for convenient excuses.
Accountability is accountability.
There you go.
Yeah.
You see? And because we are not always consistent in the manner in which we try to hold persons accountable is why we're seeing what we're seeing today.
Yeah. And what makes it worse is that your internal imperialists is who tend to roll out the red carpet for the external ones.
No, that has always been the case in history.
Yeah.
You understand? That has always been the case. I mean, look, right now, again, in Jamaica, there's a whole issue about the Maroons, you know, giving an apology, you know, to persons, because you would have known that the Maroons had some sort of treaty with the Europeans that any Africans that left the plantation that would have returned it, you see? So there's always a collaboration one way or the other, unfortunately.
You mentioned an interesting thing about the Maroons.
Yes.
So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Cool. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the News Behind the News with Ralph Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. And this afternoon, I'm joined with Mr. Riegnald, Bakari, Arrindell. And, you know, even as we're talking about Caribbean history and political developments, I'm glad you mentioned the Maroons because they now have a young leader. I forget his name. Coffee.
I can't remember his name.
But he's been having quite some battles with the government, particularly as it relates to, I guess I would say in a sense, almost sovereignty of the Maroon land. And because we know that, a byproduct of colonialism too is it recognizes the changing of your identity, not just how you view and see yourselves, but even the landscape. Because one of the ways in which we sell out, country for sale, is by giving out land to multinationals,
the highest bidder,
basically, which has a direct effect on on that natural landscape, but your connection, the identity to the land.
Of course.
So that's something that just came to mind.
Yeah. I mean, look, and just to go back again, when we look at the Grenadian Revolution, we would have seen that at one point most of the people gravitated towards Comrade Maurice Bishop. You understand? They said he was more down to earth. He was more charismatic. He was more of a people's person, in contrast to a Bernard Cord, who was very strategic. He was very dogmatic and so forth and so on, you see? And it is believed that because of the growing popularity that Bishop was receiving, played a role in the eventual split that would have happened. You see, even when we look at the struggle for liberation in Guyana, where you had two African leaders, one was Cujo and I think the other one was Coffee. The names elude me, but what do we see happen? They were championing, for the liberation, and then when they got it, a split emerged. And then what would have happened? One group would have, in turn utilized the tools, the mechanism to continue, the oppression, the oppressive system that they were fighting against.
Yeah.
I've also in my studies of the Haitian Revolution, I've seen certain instances like that also, where the liberators in turn have become to some extent the very same oppressors.
Yeah.
You see, so that's why at times, and it might sound like a contradiction, but it's just to show that I'm conscious of the contradiction. That at times persons who are championing independence, we need to be very careful as to the reason why.
Yeah.
I am sure you love Frantz Fanon as much as I do. And I'm sure you would have read the book Black Skin, White Mask. And he says that the black man only wants to live in Massa's house so that he is able to inflict the type of power that Massa exercises.
Yep.
You see?
Yep.
So we got to be very, very careful, when we are talking about national liberation and independence, because we need to know.
Because there have been so many historical, it's too much.
There are many cases.
Burkina Faso, Thomas Sankara, his own right man again.
There you go.
So
there you go. You see, and then the media has such a funny way of how you say presenting our historical enemies or questionable persons as heroes today. Malcolm X taught us we are going to love whoever you hate, and we're going to hate whoever you love. So when I see Western corporate-owned media profiling an African president, I become very suspicious. You understand what I'm saying?
Rightly so.
I become very suspicious. You see?
Yeah, rightly so.
Yeah.
Now, I like to localize things a bit.
Sure.
While the discussion is still relevant, because the key thing that I made a note of it too is basically when you stated that you found out more about our regional history and our local history being away.
Yes.
And many persons have shared that same sentiment here on this program. But what stood out to me is even as you shared that you graduated from Sundial.
Yes.
Because I think all that we discussed so far really stems from the fact that there is a absolute disconnection between what I think St. Martin believes our children should have should be as an end result when it comes to knowledge and information. Because for example, in the academy, because we follow Caribbean-based program, we learn about the Grenadian Revolution and so forth. But then if you go into a school with a Dutch school and or maybe a religious board, etc., it all changes. So I think that is where we have to basically streamline things to a point where, there has to be some sort of common knowledge or I don't say agenda, but the curriculum that is somewhat uniformed, because it can't be that, across the board, even for students who go to academy, for example, you still don't even know much about, say, man, your own country.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
So, but the next thing too that I really want you to highlight is the fact, of trade unionism.
Sure.
As we discussed off air, a lot of the basic, and I mean basic stuff we enjoy today is really because of union leaders that we've had in the past. We can reference the trailblazers like Albert Peters, Willie Hayes, Rennie Richardson, who is still with us, and several others.
Sure.
But in your experience, a couple of years that you've decided to enter into the field of trade union, what would you say has stood out to you the most as far as the progress when it comes to the rights of workers, and say, man, be it private sector or public sector?
Okay. Now, I need to make an attempt to do some justice to that question, because I don't want your listeners and viewers to think that the trade union movement just spontaneously came on the scene.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. The trade union movement is basically an outgrowth of that struggle that was ignited on the plantation. All right, because again, our forefathers and mothers was brought here to work, to extract, wealth for the metropoles. And you would be surprised that many of our African fathers and mothers organized on the plantation.
Yes, that's true.
Whether it was collective bargaining, whether it was strikes, and the list can go on and on.
Go slows, etc.
Everything.
Yep.
Whether we damage the tools, whether we burn the king field, or whatever have you. Various tactics was employed. But you see, based on the little bit of reading that I've done, it was more sporadic. It wasn't organized as we would use the term today. So eventually they started, and let me also say that it was because of the deplorable social conditions in the Caribbean that ignited a wave of protests in the 1930s, to the point where the Caribbean was considered to be the slums of the empire. So bad it was.
Yeah.
Okay? Because of these uprisings now, it kind of forced the British Empire to take a harder and closer look at making reforms. And I use that word, in quotation.
Yep.
You understand? But besides that, our ancestors would have learned the strength of forming groups that would be dedicated and committed to look after its own interests and such. You see? Because you would know, Ralph, that each and every time workers mobilized and challenged and confronted the system, we extracted concessions. Each and every time. So whether it's, as what you said, the 8-hour day, whether it is maternity rights, whether it is
wage increase,
so forth, it came as a direct result of sacrifices that was made. It didn't come because government or of the imperialists liked us. It didn't drop from the sky like manna. It took courageous men and women.
And
right?
as you said, sacrifice.
They had to sacrifice. You understand what I'm saying? They had to sacrifice in order to get these particular gains. Now, when we look at the labor situation at St. Martin, we have to remember again, St. Martin, coming from a more communal society with fish and farming and so forth and so on, limited population, many persons had to go in order to work. Okay? At one particular time, you had a situation in Cuba where the Cuban economy was closed off because of their, leanings, ideological leanings. And of course, tourists needed some place to go. And, the government at that time said, hey, well, you all can come here. You see, we're going to set up some hotels, some casinos, some clubs and so forth. You walk in, come here and relax and things. You see?
Leisure, yeah.
Yeah, okay? But the thing is now, right? From since that time, the manner in which our economy was organized, it wasn't necessarily because of an organic demand.
Yeah.
It wasn't directly from our aspirations. It was more like, hey, we see an opportunity to make some money. We see an opportunity to
in a sense, you can say chance.
Well, of course, because you didn't want to take the chance, right? And how you say, kind of nod your head in agreement with Castro at the time, because you know what's going to happen to you.
Correct.
You see, so it was kind of a reaction, you see. But what they did, they organized our economy in such a way that our basis for existence was just to serve.
Yes, that's it right there.
You see? So instead of looking for ways to produce and to own, important aspects of the supply chain, we say here, we are the quote-unquote friendly island. We have beautiful beaches, you know what I mean? It's very easy to come here and set up shop. We are different than our Caribbean brothers and sisters because we are multilingual. I mean, you see the same thing. On one hand, we talk about Caribbean unity and such, and on the other hand, we are distinguishing ourselves, how we quote-unquote better. To the point where we would even say, hey, you know what, our minimum wage is lower. You can come here because, they work hard and so forth and so on. You see? So of course, your labor laws had to reflect that. Your labor laws and standards had to, reflect the ideas of the persons who you want to attract. Okay? Because who were you attracting at the time? Americans. Europeans. And they have a totally different experience when it comes to labor. Because they know in Europe, in America, labor is no joke. So, of course, they could have come down here and taken advantage, of the workers and everything, because, hey, our parents just want to make some money and, buy some blocks and set up themselves or do whatever they wanted to do. But massive exploitation was happening as it continues today, in terms of wage theft, in terms of poor working conditions, in terms of occupational health and safety, and the list goes on. I mean, how is it possible, Ralph? How is it possible that persons from here were treated with such disdain, right? Just so that we can brag and boast about having 5-star hotels and so forth. But when you look at the manner in which the wealth is distributed, has it reached Middle Region? Has it reached the KBs? Has it reached, has it reached those places? But what we continue to see is that the wealth remains concentrated in the hands of a few people. It continues to serve the needs for a few people.
Plantations in Martin.
It continue going. The only difference is we was cutting cane, but today we in a restaurant. You understand what I'm saying? Even when you look at the manner in which workers are discriminated against, certain companies only hire certain people from certain regions.
And have been allowed to do so unchallenged.
There you go.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? How is that possible?
Yeah.
That to me blows my mind.
Well, and that is why I so believe in, as you rightly said, holding those internal imperialists accountable.
You have to hold them accountable. You understand?
They allow it.
Listen to me, right? It has always been ironic for me, right? Especially when I was in the labor movement, because I saw it face on. You are here negotiating with a company that finance political parties. What do you expect to come out of that?
They're gonna call.
Okay, we have been in situations where we are negotiating for pay increases for workers who have not received an increase in 7-10 years. The company says they have no money. But then when you open the newspaper, you see the very same company giving donations. Where did that money come from? You understand what I'm saying? It's just like government today. Government will say they never have money. They never have money, okay? But I promise you, should government fall today, right now,
there's allocation for
there is money for elections. There is money to pay outgoing ministers and members of parliament. And there is money to pay incoming ministers and incoming members of parliament.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So these are the contradictions, and that's what I said. I look at the external imperialists, right, with the same scrutiny that I look at the internal ones. Because you can't tell me that you are for the people. But when I look at your policies, okay, when I look at your policies, it deviates. It deviates from that promise. You see what I'm saying? Because of the labor movement on St. Martin, I will say, and I stand to be corrected, we saw the emergence and the development of the middle class. Okay? Persons.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
Persons was able, to purchase homes, send their children to school, set up businesses and so forth. We saw that. I mean, there are the stories abound of how some of our parents met at Mullet Bay. Some of us are Mullet Bay babies. You understand what I'm saying? But it was, and again, don't get me wrong, they had their issues also. But if it wasn't for labor leaders,
correct,
for labor leaders to say, what you're doing, you are exploiting the people,
correct,
and they deserve their fair share, I don't know where we would have been today.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that, because of course I have to plug in friendly anger, even as we refer to righteous anger, because that's one of the books that really detail the birth and beginning of the labor movement at St. Martin, and that rightly shows all the men and women who came together to fight for you who wasn't there at that time, because things couldn't continue the way they was. And I believe, again, going back to our discussion about what it is we want our children to know, to understand, to believe, that's where books like that, our history, our story, plays a prevalent role. Because if it's absent, then they too, there's a detachment from them and the country and their society.
Oh, definitely. If you want to understand the history of a people, you need to take a closer look at the labor movement of that particular country. You understand? Because it shows you the forces and the conditions that the people were under in order to progress, in order to develop. We often walk away with the impression as though it was tourism that is responsible for modernization. Of course not. It was for the men and women that worked long hours, to make, a decent living in order to use this disposable income, right, in the economy. Because we would know when we study, capital flows, when we study the political economy of things. These transnational corporations, they come, maybe they invest in one or two activities, but the bulk of their money is exported, is repatriated to the host country. Or it is used to acquire more wealth. You see, we call that the vertical integration of things. But if it wasn't for everyday people to use their disposable income, I think the inequality in this place would have been much worse than we see it today. You understand? Because we often talk about, this one create jobs. But what type of jobs? Yeah,
especially when you have people who are underemployed.
Exactly, and underemployed because of this idea of seasonality. Okay? We talk about, St. Martin has seasons. Okay, fine, not a problem. But not every business operates according to the lines of seasonality. You understand what I'm saying? And that's something we need to be a bit more firm. I know for a fact that the labor movement is and continues to do its utmost to address this issue, of the abuse of the short-term contract. There were some amendments made, and to be quite honest, at this particular time, I can't even tell you with much certainty what the status of it is. We've heard many announcements and utterances about how it's going to be fixed and such. But at the end of the day, your economy was built on the exploitation of labor.
Yeah. So at this point, to change things around, this now goes back to even as how you reference your great grandfather, ensuring that our people we change that mindset of servitude to being industrial.
You got to. You have to look at this. Do you remember at one point they talked about the Pearl of China?
Yes, not too long ago.
Okay.
And there's a project actually supposed to be coming even recently.
I hope it doesn't come. Okay, but they was talking about they want to erect this place.
Yeah.
And that they would have, I think they would have imported certain equipment or so. It really escapes my memory. But what was upsetting to me was that the maintenance and the development of certain aspects of that operation, they wanted to bring in persons in order to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, but why can't, our children learn those skills?
Correct.
So that they in turn would have been able to protect, and maintain those particular.
What they do is this falsity of, what we're going to do, we're going to donate ACs, and in this, we're going to donate ACs and chairs, let's say, and instruments to your school program, etc., to make up for the fact that, we're now bringing in more people into your country, which is kind of reaches capacity where land mass is concerned, which will heighten, that social tension that already exists.
Yeah, and again, we also have to be mindful of this. A lot of these companies, if I'm not mistaken, enjoy what is referred to as a tax holiday.
Yeah.
Right? But how did that tax holiday, how is it financed? Through taxpayers. You understand?
Yeah.
So it is impossible. It is sometimes inconceivable that our tax money is being used to fund, right? To give these breaks. And our people cannot be positioned in the upper echelons.
Yeah. One of the main ones I've been referencing particularly is casinos.
There you go.
I mean, at this point, 'cause, with many of them being here for almost 2 decades or over 15, 12 years, how much long, if we have a deficit, how much longer can you be exempt from paying TOT?
Well,
if you sell 5 Johnny Cakes, you have to pay your turnover.
There you go.
Where's the solidarity in a literally a enterprise based off of the flow and turnover of cash?
Well, and even besides that,
with no regulation.
For a society that claims that small businesses is the backbone.
Yeah, well, literally.
That
but
claims.
How much pressure can you put on our backbone?
There you go. So you see, so we use words.
Yeah.
But as I learned recently, and I can't remember who said it, so you'll have to correct me. But words have meanings. Words have meanings. So you can't just be saying these because it sounds good, because some of us are going to stop and say, hey, hold on, partner.
Yeah.
What it is you mean when you say that? Or are you saying that my tax money is being used, right, to give these companies a break, but I can't even get relief for my GB bill? That's what you're saying, right? Because you're talking about, they're going to create jobs. Okay, what type of jobs are they going to create? And from those jobs, how many of them will be permanent? How many of them will be part-time? How many of them will be via job agencies and so forth and so on?
Well, that's the next thing too, because you see that evolution of the tactics of exploitation of labor.
Yes.
Now this whole thing with the job agencies or temp agencies that are, in a sense, getting away with a crazy amount of abuses, and so this is where now unions have that responsibility to continue the work that they do, but especially in challenging the legal structure of society, because things continue to evolve.
Listen, to me right now, if you believe in reincarnation, right, as I do, I would want to come back as a trade unionist. You understand what I'm saying? Because when you're a part of the trade union movement, it is your responsibility to demonstrate another world is possible. You have to challenge the existing political and economic order without any apology. You have to go after, you have to attack those legislation that is hurting your people. You understand what I'm saying? When I'm studying uprisings in different countries, the mere 10-cent increase in the price of bread, Ralph, is enough to put people on the street.
Yeah.
They are not buying in to these hollow rhetoric and slogans about resilience.
Yeah.
They ain't having it. the mere increase in the price of fuel is enough to pull them on the street.
Yeah.
Poverty levels, inequality, poor education is enough to pull them on the street. You see what I'm saying? But you need a trade unionism who will serve as a vanguard to mobilize public anger, to mobilize outrage, and to channel it in a particular direction. You got to do that. Come what may. You see, in some countries, when I went to Costa Rica to follow a regional workshop, I sat with presidents from Ecuador, from Colombia and so forth. And when you hear the stories that they have to go through, you know, St. Martin is a walk in the park. You understand what I'm saying? It's a walk in the park. I'm saying, when are we going to reach our potential? I believe the trade union movement is the only movement on St. Martin that can bring genuine and transformative change in this society. I believe that with all of my heart.
Yeah.
But we are sitting on our potential.
Yeah, because on that too, that's where leadership comes in.
That's where leadership comes in, from the bottom and the top.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. There's a lot more we can say, Bakari, but man, I would like to thank you so much for that which you've shared, because definitely there needs to be a part 2. So I'll definitely be reaching out to you soon on that. And I'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us on today's program, and be sure to join us again tomorrow. Take care.